I think we are just about all in here and our live stream has started. Welcome to anyone watching on YouTube. And I'm just going to ask Vahap Bey, Ece Hanım, and Zeynep Hanım, our friends from main office. Once again, they're back with us this week. I would like to ask for their help just in monitoring the waiting room to make sure that none of our teachers or our other friends are waiting to get in. All right, let me share my screen. And can I just get a thumbs up, Zeynep, if you can see my presentation right now? Okay, so we're back here again, life skills in the English language classroom. You all got the introduction last night. Tonight is time for activities, time to show you so much here within about an hour and 15 minutes. Then we will open the floor to questions as we do every week. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and write in the chat box or just save them until the end and you can ask them then. So I am going to just recap what this course is. Now I redesigned this slide. Hopefully it's a little bit visually easier to follow here. But last week on Thursday, we started with our intro and developing what we called a critical lens. We did some activities with everything from optical illusions to many other activities like photo descriptions. We did a guided drawing activity. All of those were shared last week on the FLD Life Skills blogs for your particular grade levels. We have a separate blog for kindergarten, primary, and middle school. So you can find all resources from last week and for the future sessions as well on those blogs. Now for session 2 tonight, we are moving to, I wrote it out actually, reading and listening activities. We're focusing on what we call receptive skills in our curriculum, which obviously, as we have listed here, include reading and listening. But before that, I'm also going to be giving you a little icebreaker section, as I promised last week, activities you can do in any lesson, whether it's reading, listening, or anything else. You can even add it to lessons that you're already following in your lesson plans that you receive from main office, just to make the lessons a little more engaging and also to make sure you're focusing on different sorts of life skills in your lessons. Next week, we will continue on October 14th with speaking and writing. I would say that's the most packed session of all. So for next week, make sure you're ready to fill your notebooks with new activity ideas. And then session 4 in 2 weeks, we will wrap up the course with assessment. And I know last week we had a couple of questions about that. And it is quite an important session because, of course, if you can't measure that students have learned, how can you say that you've taught anything? If you look at the bottom here, you see all resources and weekly discussions may be accessed at the blogs. Another reminder, and let's get started. So for tonight, our agenda. Now, I promised you I would jump right into activities. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. All of the participants are Bahçeşehir teachers. I have them held captively as an audience for an hour. So I might as well review a couple of curricular tools that we use in main office to make sure that you understand how it is we develop those lesson plans and those unit plans that you're receiving, and to give you extra tools as teachers to know how you can create better informed lesson materials and to understand the logic of the academic program you're teaching in. Also tonight, we're going to look at, as I said, icebreaker activities, active listening and reading activities. We are also going to do a little bit with media literacy, as we will every week. This week, specifically about introducing your students to what media bias is, even at the youngest ages. So we will look at that. Now, a little warning for all the activities tonight. There will be a variety, most of them intended for the classroom. Obviously, not every single grade level and every single classroom. It's up to you to see what is applicable for your classes, what you can adapt to work in your classes if they don't work as we've shared them. But generally, just to get you thinking about things you can do with your students to help improve the quality of your life skills lessons. I'm speaking quickly tonight because there's a lot to pack in, so forgive me if I'm going too quickly. I'll try to slow down enough right now just to make sure you're clear about where you can access the tools I'm showing you now. Because before we do any life skills lesson, we have to be sure that the materials we're presenting to our students are accessible for their levels. So at main office, when we are planning our unit-based, theme-based lessons, we typically use a number of what we call standardization tools. And this helps us understand how students progress through our program step by step. The most common that I would assume all of you know very well is the CEFR. I'm posting it here just as a reminder, right in your faces. just to make sure that you remember this is always the best professional development tool that you have at your disposal to learn more about the academic framework you're working in at Bahçeşehir College. The full text is available at the link in the presentation. It's available in 40 languages, so if you want to read it in Turkish or any other language that's available, you can. Now, here is the global scale of the CEFR. This is what we typically follow in our program. So this course is covering K to 8, we said. So for us, that means pre-A1, before we're even on this scale, as we progress through kindergarten, all the way through A1 in first and second grade, A2 in third and fourth, and then B1 getting into the lower levels of B2 in some activities. Mostly we call it B1 plus in grades 5 through 7. So this gives you an idea when you hear this term, the CEFR, as a teacher, if you really want to know what it means, well, go get the whole document, but make sure you understand these, what are called global descriptors that give you a clear idea of what students can do typically at each learning level. Another document I would highly recommend to all of our teachers to go back and make sure that you're familiar with is the Global Scale of English. Now, the CEFR originally was not a document that was prepared for young learners specifically. So that means we've had to use a lot of supporting tools to make sure that we are able to use the CEFR effectively. One of those is the GSE, the Global Scale of English. If you have heard this term before in our program, but you have not looked it up, I highly recommend it. You will see GSE learning objectives referenced in our program. You will hear a lot of us using that acronym in main office. Here is a link for you. I recommend you go in and you explore a little bit this site as well. Another English profile, I would say one of the most useful for teachers and curriculum creators. The English profile helps us in terms of a guide of what we should be teaching or what is typically taught at each language level. So you can go into the English profile. You see here, it's very small. I'm sorry about that. But if you see in the image vocabulary profile, grammar profile, typically from this site, you can go to the databases. You can find which vocabulary forms are typically used at each level of the CEFR. Quite a useful tool that we lean on heavily in main office, but it's even good for teachers, whether you're creating extra remedial materials or if you're just curious, this is a good site to go for reference. And the equals core inventory is quite similar. It will tell you, expanding that to language functions, communicative functions, what is typically taught at each level of the CEFR. Finally, I recommend this be printed and posted on every teacher's desk right in front of your face, or at least up in your teacher room. This gives you a clear idea when we talk about lower order and higher order thinking skills. This gives us a nice reference for what kind of action verbs, what kind of outcomes and activities might take place in lessons targeting those particular skill areas. Yet another reference tool for all of you to use. Tonight, we're not focused on this, but again, I have a captive audience, so I thought I would share it with you. Please make sure when you go back to this presentation, not referencing anything about life skills. If you want to make sure that you're really on top of how we do things at Bahçeşehir College in the Foreign Languages Department, these are your tools. Finally, getting more into life skills. Last week, I showed you the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework. I showed you one of the general definitions of the critical thinking area. These are some of the can-do statements specifically within the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework, and it gives you an idea, again, of what students can do in terms of a programmatic definition, which we talked about last week. You'll see a lot of the activities tonight reference these can-do statements from the critical thinking list and a lot of the others from the different categories of the Life Competencies Framework as well. So highly recommended for teachers to be aware of what is it that students actually do when they're demonstrating critical thinking or emotional development or creativity or collaboration or any other life skill area that's contained in this framework. So I flew through that. And now we will give a few descriptors. What is the life skills classroom like? You're about to see icebreakers. So when I walk into that classroom and I'm trying to develop an atmosphere that's conducive for students to develop life skills, what am I going to do in that classroom? What's that classroom going to be like? Here are some adjectives for you. That classroom should be engaging, And you will see that a lot of these words are quite similar to how we describe our program here at Bachishir. One second, sorry, my video went out somehow. Okay, so life skill classroom is engaging. We want to make sure that students are participants in their own learning and are having fun in their lesson, as we say in our departmental mission statement. We say that the life skills classroom is student-centered, that it's centered on student talk, that student talk time is at least what teacher talk time is in any given lesson. We say that the life skills classroom is process-oriented as opposed to product-oriented. You've heard us use the word process writing a lot, especially middle school levels and above. Well, what is the reason for that? Because as students focus on the process and not just the product and the grade that they're going to receive, of course, then we're able to develop those skills more effectively. Inquiry-based, students are asking questions. Our curriculum is driven by essential questions, as we call them. A life skills classroom is asking students to think about why and what and all of the other question words. Higher order thinking supportive, I say. And that is a classroom that not only focuses on having students remember, understand, and apply, but also really focuses on having them analyze and also evaluate and create. Finally, task and project based, and that's how we do it. So if you see these adjectives, if anyone asks you, what is the Bachishir College English classroom like? Well, it is a life skills conducive classroom because all of these adjectives are also quite descriptive of our own curriculum. Now, without further ado, I'm going to move on to, and this last graphic, by the way, gives you an idea of how that takes place. The traditional classroom where the teacher was up in front of the class, giving a lecture, giving homework, then the teacher's role being sage on the stage has changed to, and we can call this in many different ways, but one example is the flipped classroom model. But for us, it's just the way we go about our normal business as Bachishir teachers in the 21st century. We are the guide on the side. We are giving our students preparation outside of class so that they can do independent work there. They can come to class and they can work collaboratively to achieve the learning outcomes that we have spelled out for them. And now, without further ado, the icebreakers. These are what I'm hoping I see on Twitter and Instagram tomorrow because you've tried them in some of your classes. And if you'd like to share any feedback on how these go in your classes, you're always welcome to. But getting students started then in developing that life skills classroom is getting them started with questions. Now, this is one that I love. For all of these, you're getting a little preview here, but you will have references on the Life Skills blog with usually dozens, if not hundreds more. This is one that I like to play with students and I like to put them on the spot. So why don't I do that with our helpers here? Eje, it looks like you need to be energized a little. So let me put you on the spot here. And I know your answer, but I'm gonna ask you, cat or dog?
Dog, Mr. Benton.
I guessed. Eje has it's not a new dog anymore. She got it, I guess, what, 6 months ago, a year ago?
Yeah, a year ago, about a year ago.
Okay. So generally giving students a binary choice gives them this chance to start a lesson in a fun way to express something about their personality to help the other students know something about them. But when we're trying to get students to see other perspectives and think critically, we put them on the spot on a different level. Last week, we talked about the word "it depends" as being our key phrase from the session. Tonight, our key phrase is, well, there's not a phrase. It's getting students to assume another perspective. So Eje, explain to me why you think cats are better than dogs.
Well, do I have to? I don't think cats are better than dogs. Can I explain why I think dogs are better than cats?
Okay,
No.
then imagine someone who is a cat lover.
Okay.
Imagine someone who likes cats more than dogs. Why do you think they might like cats more than dogs?
Okay. I think they might say cats are more noble than dogs. They require less attention. They're fine on their own.
Okay. I would probably disagree with some of that. I'm a dog person also, by the way. But okay, so the point is Eje was already able to demonstrate higher order thinking skills in a very simple activity, just by putting herself in the shoes of the other person. So for example, last little question, because as you work up, you get obviously more complexity. Once you get up to the middle school levels or even the high school levels, you start encountering questions like this: high paying job with low certainty or a lower paying job with high certainty? Vahape, I'm going to give that one to you. What do you think?
Well, that's a difficult question. Of course, I mean, we would want high-paying job in any case, without any mention to certainty, especially for those who live in Istanbul or in a kind of bigger city. We would prefer high-paying job, not out of our, I mean, preference, but out of our obligations. I mean.
Okay. Great, Vahape. I'm not going to put you on the spot and make you argue the opposite right now. But in general, this is what we do, both just to get students familiar with sharing their opinions and also to get them familiar with considering another perspective. Now, I've got a list of 89 of these, which is a little exaggerated, but you'll be able to go through those, find ones that are interesting to you. These are some that I've done with classes in the past, but it's nice even in the younger ages to start a lesson off. Another icebreaker activity: getting students familiar with the difference between fact and opinion. Now, we talked about this last week as being kind of one of the first steps to being able to think critically, and especially when you get into areas like information, media literacy of life skills. This is obviously an essential skill. So when we're doing fact and opinion, I've actually got a worksheet here for you. This website down at the bottom, some of you already know it, Super Teacher Worksheets. There are many on the site that are totally free that you can go to and you can download as supplemental worksheets to do in your classes. But it's nice activities just to give students a concept of what the difference between a fact and opinion is. So I want you to tell me, Zainab, you know you're next in line. Look at number 4. Parrots are prettier than blue birds. Would you say that's a fact or an opinion?
It's an opinion, Mr. Benton.
Okay, and you have to justify that, of course. Why?
Because I don't think that parrots are prettier than bluebirds.
Well, I do,
depends
Zainab.
on the people. It
I think
depends
parrots are prettier, so it's a fact because I think so, right?
it's just preference. It depends on the people.
Okay, that's nice. And of course, you're going to get different language coming back from your students in terms of how they're justifying themselves.
Yeah.
But often you'll see your students will get frustrated and that they can't explain this. And that's what you will help them and facilitate for them. How about this one, Vahape? A cheetah can run faster than a lion. Fact or opinion?
It's a fact.
Okay.
It is measured. It is supported by scientific data, scientific proof. So it's a fact.
Okay, so fact is pretty straightforward, good justification. However, I'm not going to stop there. I'm always going to push you one more level as well. And I'm going to ask you, give me an exception. It's a fact, but aren't there exceptions?
Well, of course, there are some
might a lion
exceptions.
run faster than a cheetah?
For example, if the cheetah is injured or
Okay.
has kind of health problems, then of course a lion can run faster than a cheetah. But this is an exception. Exceptions
Okay.
do not change the reality.
Very, very true. Now, again, the point of that is, again, to get your students familiar with that concept as well. Exception. It's certainly not an A1 or an A2 level word. It's certainly not an A1 or an A2 level concept, but obviously we are looking at multiple levels. Fact and opinion, explaining why something's an opinion, and giving exceptions to facts. And then you have a nice activity there to, and I would say a foundational activity to many different life skills. Now, if we go, and sorry for the baby shouting in the background in advance to all participants, I do have an infant here at home in another room, and she's quite active in the evenings, so apologies. Now, another one that I love, this is our comic strip interpretation and prediction. Now, students love comics anyway, and this site down here is just a teacher-created blog, and there are other activities like this, but I love these because there's something visual. You get the element of photo description like we talked last week, but then you also get many different layers of higher order thinking skills involved here with interpreting what's going on in these photos and predicting what's going to happen next after the last photo. Now, we are too packed tonight for me to force Zeynep, Vahap, or Ece to do this activity, but these are fun. You'll notice a lot more examples of these if you go to the blog and you see the resources this week. Another one, this one I am going to put you on the spot. What's going on in this picture? I want to hear an explanation here. Ece, what is going on here?
Okay, so they're looking at most of the people are looking up at the sky. I'm guessing there's like an alien spaceship, but
Okay.
they're very happy about this because it's that kind of a world. And the man in the suit is he already knows that the spaceship is coming, so he's not that interested, I think.
Yeah, Ece, that was quite a creative example, actually. And we want to encourage detailed examples like that. In previous courses, when I've done this example, I usually get like a 3-word answer. They're looking at the sun. So I like your alien spaceship comments, and I hope that you're encouraging your students to give detailed responses. I like to push them even further, though, and pose specific questions, analyzing the photo a bit more. These people are looking. You said most people are looking up, but I noticed over here, these people have their eyes totally closed here. And so it's like they're not looking. This man here is too cool to even look up. He's not concerned about what's going on at all. He might even be looking at the woman, wondering what she's doing. You see me speculating. You see me taking this up to an even higher level. Give me a consensus answer here from our group. What's going on in this photo? Zeynep, I'll let you give that answer. What's happening here?
Okay, after a very long time, those people meet. I guess they're meeting with the sunlight, and this man is a tourist, and he doesn't need any sunlight because he's coming from a sunny country.
Exactly. I was actually thinking they live in London. And so the poor people just see gray clouds every day. And there's the one day in the whole winter when there's some sunlight in London. So if you see the link at the bottom, this is actually a New York Times series. There are literally dozens of these. I'm going to share with you several links where you can go. And I just recommend starting a class and posing this question to your students, showing them one of the pictures that you find particularly interesting, and just getting them to try to guess what's going on and to engage them in challenging languages, a language that forces them to have to analyze what they see. Now, I'm going to move ahead. Now, we talk a lot about higher order thinking skills, but we also can't lose sight of the fact that there are lower order thinking skills. That doesn't mean they're not important. Actually, it is important to prime students for lessons to recall, which is probably the lowest, it is the lowest level of Bloom's taxonomy. But at the same time, we do this. In most sessions, when I do this as a workshop, we do a little competition, but I'm not going to put you through that tonight. But I have the letter B here. How many words in 30 seconds, or you can make it a minute, can you list on a sheet of paper that start with the letter B? Usually I would say go now, and you would try it, but I'm not going to. I can guess around the average, around, let's say, for people of your age and education, probably, let's say 20 words, 15 to 20 words. But did you know, research shows, a side note, that actually women are typically much more skilled at this task and can list more on average than men can. But with your students, it's something to get them into a competitive mode, an engaged mode. And I promise you any kind of competitive activity will, but also priming their language knowledge by asking them to think back and recall is never an activity that you shouldn't do, as long as you're combining it with other higher order thinking skill based activities in the class. Now, this one we did last week. However, I wanted to remind you all the wordplay. Now, I'm going to give you a book this week, a full book. It's actually written by a publisher, but it's been out in the press for so long now that we can have the rights to share it without paying any royalties. And I'm going to do that for you all. It gives you 81 separate critical thinking activities that you can do for your class, much more than I can show you in this session, but many more icebreakers. So I don't use the whole session time on only icebreakers. So you can go in, dive deeper. You can find wordplay in that book, and it gives you full instructions in terms of how to do the activity with suggestions for lesson planning, which is quite useful, of course. Spot the difference. Now, I'm going to make you all dizzy now because I'm going to show you a website. And I'm hoping that you use it with your students this week because it's really fun, it's really engaging, and it's quite good for an icebreaker for specifically for analytical thinking, critical thinking. This one here is it's actually Neo K-12. Many of you might have actually seen this site before, or maybe even seen this game. However, I wonder in the chat box, who can find a difference? It's not that easy, to be honest, especially for the little ones in your classes. They will struggle with this, but if you project this in front of your classes or in an online lesson, there are 10 differences between these two photos. And when I first saw this, I had to stare at it for quite a while before I found the first one. I wonder, what are we getting in the chat box, Zainab?
Okay, I have one answer. The top of the smaller dome, said Dennis Hojam.
Is
The top.
this here? This one is smaller. This one is large, like higher.
Yeah, that's fine. It's correct.
Great. Okay, so it gives you a check mark, and then it shows you the differences remaining. So you will get a nice healthy noise level in your classes when you show this, as students enjoy participating. Now, I was proud of myself, by the way. I found the guy's sunglasses, so sorry if I stole your thunder. I'm going to take that one for myself. Is there another one you see there, Edje?
Yeah, actually, Mr. Benton, in one of the paintings, I think. And I think we've already had this answer in the chat box, but the top left painting, I think it's like a factory maybe, and yeah, that one was different.
Oh wow, that's a very detailed analysis of these photos. I don't think I ever noticed that. I don't think I've ever finished all 10 of these on this activity, to be honest. But if you do find that a particular photo is giving your students problems, you can always load a new picture and you can get something totally new that you can do with your classes. And there's a bunch of these. There are other educational games as well on Neo K-12. Again, a fun website to go to, have something you can do, add in an analytical icebreaker to your classes. And I'm sure, as all of you are aware, you can never have too many tools in your toolbox. So let me go back to my presentation here, spot the difference. And this is the book, 81 Fun Critical Thinking Activities. I'm going to share with you. There are things like this where there's no language involved. The language that you involve in this actually has to be generated by the teacher. You have to lead that. You have to prompt students to speak. This is a pattern recognition activity, quite higher order thinking skills supportive here. I'm going to ask you, Vahap, what's the answer for number one? A, B, C, what comes in D? What would come next?
Wow. Let me, do I have a minute?
It's hard. I'm not being very fair because I know very well that Vahap Bey has had very many meetings all day today, and I'm throwing this brain teaser activity at him.
Yeah, but I should have found that. I mean,
so it's basically an
kind of
analogy.
hard.
So you have A and B have a relation,
Yes.
and C and the following.
Yeah, smaller
relation.
clever, yeah.
Exactly. So you would go with 3. So doing these again and getting your students.
Thank you for your help, Mr. Benton.
No problem. No problem. So these activities, though, are nice in the class because of the language that it generates. And also you can stump your students like I just did to Vahap Bey there. Another one, balloon debate. We do not, sadly, don't have time for this evening. I'm going to put the instructions for the balloon debate in the blog for this week so you can read through it. Basically, it's prompting your students, putting them in groups and giving them a number of either famous people or even students in the class and getting them to debate who should stay in the balloon and who should not be in the balloon. It's a longer explanation than that. But again, because of time, let's move forward. Great activity, though, for an icebreaker. And I think this is the last icebreaker, ethical dilemmas. I love these, especially at a young age, because you, again, are getting to so many different areas of life skills with one very basic foundational activities. And you also have quite a nice built-in language activity here with conditionals, of course, as many of you might have noticed in the activities. So I'm going to pose this one to you, Zainab, and be honest. If you found, and I say dinars, let's say lira, if you found 2,000 lira on the street, would you keep it?
I would, and I would consider this situation as a lock. And I would think that karma loves me, so I would keep it.
Okay, so Zeynep is the finders, keepers, losers, weepers mentality.
Yeah.
I wonder, Vahap or Eje, do you disagree? Do either of you have a different opinion?
Well, I'm being honest. I wouldn't keep that. I would just try to find a place to leave it, or to leave it for somebody whom I can trust. By the way, I'm really honest on this.
Okay. Well, now you can guess. I'm going to make it more challenging, and we're going to make the phrase for this week. Now we're going to set it officially. The question from teachers is what if? And I want you to continue asking what if as long as you can, to keep posing this back in to the students. So what if there's no one else around? There's no one to report it to. You didn't see anyone drop it. You're in a place with no other person around you. Eje, what if that's the case? Would you keep it?
Of course, Mr. Benton, I would first try to do, whatever I can, and then I would keep it. And then I would maybe donate some of it and, keep some of it and buy myself a gift.
All right, very nice. So taking it another level, what she would actually do with the money then if she kept it. So very nice, thank you. So if you look at all of these, what I love is we start with the foundation, but then especially for middle schoolers and above, we actually then can get into, again, ICT, media literacy, other areas with posed ethical dilemmas like if your friends are coming over and you want to watch a new movie that isn't available on any streaming platform, would you download it illegally? Zeynep, let's be honest again. Would you download it, Zeynep?
I would. I would download
We are
it.
learning a lot about you this evening.
Yeah,
Keeping the
sorry.
money, downloading illegally. All these are no-nos. So of course
we want to watch a movie. It's just a movie. I would download it.
Okay, so Zeynep obviously needed to go through the life skills program at Bachashir College so that she could answer this in a way that would be, of course not. This is a media literacy consideration here. We want to impart the value in our students that it's not okay to steal intellectual property and to download illegally. But again, then we say, what are the exceptions? Are there exceptions? And a lot of what you're doing with life skills and with activities like this is in your teacher talk. It's inspiring a lot of student talk with the way that you prompt them and the way that you're getting them to respond to you to demonstrate higher order thinking. It's minimizing your language by asking these formulaic questions like, what's an exception? What if? And putting it back in their shoulders, on their shoulders, so that they have to respond to you again. And with that, we are to active listening here. Now, many of you have a bit of an advantage in this area because a lot of you, especially the foreign teachers who have joined us tonight in primary and middle school, have used those Cambridge Voices books. So you know that actually active listening is a part of speaking skills. It's a part of what oracy is teaching. And teaching students to be good listeners is really something quite foundational to getting them to be able to be good communicators and also good speakers. Active listening is quite important also because the distinction we're making is when students are active listeners, then they are certainly, we as teachers are certainly more able to incorporate various aspects of life skills into our lessons. This is a nice little graphic that you can actually get. You could even put this up in your classrooms. It is slant. Sit straight up and close to the speaker. Listen with your eyes, ears, body, and heart, which I love that phrase. Ask and answer questions, nod your head, track the speaker. And so these are all really good tips for your students in just a basic way to get them to understand what the criteria are for being an active listener. Sender versus the receiver. The sender is the person speaking, giving the information. The receiver, obviously, is the one who's receiving the information and is active. Now, often in interactions in the lesson between teacher and student or student and student, we're focused more on the producer, the person doing the speaking, whereas the receiver is just as important in any interaction. And we want to make sure we reinforce that in our classes. This is for any teachers who are not teaching it, and specifically, I guess that would be teachers who are not in our bilingual schools using the Voices series. This is a series that we had designed specifically for us by Cambridge University Press that's now used at some other schools, but Bottcher was one of the piloting schools. And it really does a nice job of giving us a framework for teaching students active listening skills explicitly with activities in videos like this. For example, here in the video, we see a short scenario take place, and then the students go through and they actually reflect explicitly on how well the participants in the video are listening to each other. So giving students an explicit idea of what it means. That's the whole perspective we have here in our Life Skills Initiative, that we want to focus on these skills explicitly and make students aware of what they're doing when they're listening actively. Now, I'm going to force you all to do that in just a moment here, but I want to give you a preview. You're about to watch a video. It's a short video. It's nothing you would show your students, but I do in the blog this week have a list of sites where you can find more K-8 level friendly videos that you can use in your own life skills lessons. And I want you all to watch the video on the next slide. Now, of course, the people in the chat box are in safety zone there, but Zeynep, Vahape, and Ece, you are not. I am going to ask after the video, one of you to perform one of the active listening actions listed here. I'm either going to ask you to restate something you've heard, summarize what the speaker's saying, reflect upon what you've heard, ask a follow-up question, or make a connection to your own life. So let's see what this video is. Let me just quit this and go back into it so I can turn my sound on. 1 second. All right. Vahape, when the video starts, if you hear the sound on your computer, just could you give me a thumbs up?
My big idea is a very, very small idea that can unlock billions of big ideas that are at the moment dormant inside us. And my little idea that will do that is sleep. This is a room of type A women. This is a room of sleep-deprived women. And I learned the hard way the value of sleep. 2.5 years ago, I fainted from exhaustion. I hit my head on my desk. I broke my cheekbone. I got 5 stitches on my right eye. And I began the journey of rediscovering the value of sleep. And in the course of that, I studied, I met with medical doctors, scientists, and I'm here to tell you that the way to a more productive, more inspired, more joyful life is getting enough sleep. And we women are going to lead the way in this new revolution, this new feminist issue. We are literally going to sleep our way to the top, literally. Because, unfortunately, for men, sleep deprivation has become a virility symbol. I was recently having dinner with a guy who bragged that he had only gotten 4 hours sleep the night before. And I felt like saying to him, but I didn't say it, I felt like saying, you know what? If you had gotten 5, this dinner would have been a lot more interesting. There is now a kind of sleep deprivation one-upmanship. Especially here in Washington, if you try to make a breakfast date and you say, how about 8 o'clock? They're likely to tell you, 8 o'clock is too late for me, but that's okay, you know, I can get a game of tennis in and do a few conference calls and meet you at 8. And they think that means that they are so incredibly busy and productive, but the truth is they're not. Because we at the moment have had brilliant leaders in business, in finance, in politics, making terrible decisions. So a high IQ does not mean that you're a good leader. Because the essence of leadership is being able to see the iceberg before it hits the Titanic. And we've had far too many icebergs hitting our Titanics. In fact, I have a feeling that in Lehman Brothers was Lehman Brothers and Sisters. They might still be around. While all the brothers were busy, just being hyper-connected 24/7, maybe a sister would have noticed the iceberg because she would have woken up from a 7.5 or 8 hour sleep and have been able to see the big picture. So as we are facing all the multiple crises in our world at the moment, what is good for us on a personal level, what's going to bring more joy, gratitude, effectiveness in our lives, and be the best for our own careers, is also what is best for the world. So I urge you to shut your eyes and discover the great ideas that lie inside us, to shut your engines and discover the power of sleep. Thank you.
Okay, quite a suitable topic for a huge group of sleep-deprived Bakashir English teachers here, but I chose that for that reason, actually, just to remind you, you should be getting your sleep, but also to pick a video that I thought might be engaging for the audience that I have, and you should be doing the same for your students, because the goal, of course, in whichever text you're choosing, and by the way, I'm going to put a link in the blogs with a huge playlist of TED videos that are 3 minutes and under. So they're quite useful for being able to do quick activities like this. But it's what you do with the text, of course, that is so very important. So I wonder, Vahape, in just 1 or 2 sentences, can you summarize what the speaker said to us in that video?
Well, yeah, I mean, she said a lot of things about our real situation, as you mentioned, Mr. Benson, as tired teachers, tired administrators. For example, Tumaybe is really, I mean, he's here with us, but I know he had a very hectic, busy schedule, but still he's with us, and just because of this, thank you, and for our teachers as well. Well, I mean, she is trying to underline the importance of getting enough sleep. And she actually gave an example from her real experience, from her real life. And she said she began to realize the value of getting enough sleep. And it was striking for me, although I know the value of sleeping enough, because the way she explained, the way she presented was really catchy for me.
Great. And Vahape there just knocked out 2 categories. He summarized and reflected as well. And good points. I would agree with you. That was Ariana Huffington. That's that. I was trying to think of what her name was. And certainly I would agree with you there. I wonder then, Ece, if you could take it a step further and make a connection to your own life. How does what she was talking about resonate with your own life and how you sleep or not get enough sleep?
Okay, so I think what she was trying to say was that quality is more important than quantity. And I related that to my own life. So for example, if enough sleep, I always, I don't like the next day, I find it difficult to find happiness the next day. So I related to that.
Okay, very nice. So when you do a video with your students, obviously you wouldn't show that particular video, but you're going to have to prompt them and you're going to have to guide them more. So I would be asking Ece things like, why do you feel that way? What causes it? How can we feel better? What can we do differently? Obviously targeting our teacher talk to maximize their student talk and to make sure that they're actively listening. Now I'm going to go, because the time's going, to the next slide. This definitely might be on the cusp of something usable for middle school students only in our program. Definitely not for the youngest learners, I should say. Certainly for high school students and teachers and above. We will be using this worksheet in our program from time to time. A great scaffolding worksheet if you do use those TED Talk videos that your students can do to reflect on various aspects and ensure that they are engaged and actively listening when they're watching one of the videos in class. Now, other things you can do to ensure that students are incorporating various aspects of life skills into listening activities. ORC teachers certainly recognize these first two words, setting ground rules for interaction and including active listening chunks. What are some chunks of language students can use to demonstrate that they are active listeners? And there are tons of those given in those Cambridge Voices books. Backward storytelling activities are really fun. You play a part of a story for students at the end of the story, and then get them to try to anticipate what is coming before that, of course. Backward anticipation, I suppose you could say. Voice blogging. Now, there are several sites that do this for free, and I would say for teachers looking for a way to increase students' opportunities to be speaking outside of the class, look into something like this. There's something called Flipgrid. Some of you in this session right now have heard of that before, but there's a lot of others now too. There are very basic ones like Vocaroo if you just want to get students to record a response and be able to send it to you directly. But I like Flipgrid a lot because students can record themselves responding to, let's say, a text or a video that they watch, or just a prompt that you share with them. They can voice blog themselves, and then they can interact with their classmates' videos as well. They can respond to what their classmates are talking about and then respond to those as well. So you can have a lot of interaction going on outside of the class. Of course, following the directions, one of the most basic, so this is, it's nothing more than what it looks like here, is giving students an opportunity, which we do in some of our course books already, for them to be able to follow directions given verbally by the teacher or in the listening section, and getting them to actually follow. Now, you can do more involved following the direction activities like the active listening drawing activity that we did last week, and of course with TED Talks, as I just showed you. So the concept is, of course, getting students to listen carefully and understand the speaker's meaning. But there's also another aspect of English. There's an aspect that we would call prosodic skills, or that we would also call, in this particular activity, sentence stress and intonation, how we actually move through the stress of a sentence when we speak English. And this is something that explicitly is not really found too much in our curriculum. Actually, pronunciation in general is not found too much. But I think this is a fun, useful activity that you can do to make sure your students have the chance to understand whichever word that you emphasize in a phrase can totally change the meaning of that phrase. For example, Edge, I'd like you to read this first sentence, stressing the word in red.
You're going to wear the red dress?
All right. Ejay, can you just continue and read the next one?
You're going to wear the red dress?
Great.
The third one is, you're going to wear the red dress?
And finally,
you're going to wear the red dress?
Great. Now, just to be quick, can you give one example from this list, Ejay, that explains what just changed? Why did reading the words differently change the meaning? Because the words are the same. The question is the same in every single example, is it not?
Yeah, so in the first one, I'm implying that maybe someone else should wear it because I'm shocked by the fact that they're going to be wearing the red dress. Shall I continue to the
Sure, maybe just one other so we can compare.
Yeah, and in the second one, I'm maybe implying that you need to do something else with the red dress besides wearing it. For example, wash it because it's dirty.
Okay, very nice. Good explanations. Actually, really, really good explanations, Ejay. Thank you. So you get the point. Now, there are tons of activities like this that you can do. I really think it's something important that we should be doing with our students, giving them an idea of how aspects other than just the phrases, the grammar, the vocabulary they're using can actually change the meaning, and how they can be listening for that when other speakers are speaking. Now, we're going to move ahead too, because I'm panicking seeing the clock here on my side and seeing that we have a lot to go. So let's try to get through this a little bit more quickly with active reading. Now, I'm going to give you this reference for you to go and try to understand what I mean when I say active reading. And I want you to look carefully at each of these and understand how, when we active read, we're quite process focused. As I said in one of the earlier slides, we're looking at making reading a process from previewing, reading with questions in our mind, monitoring and assessing our own understanding of the text as we read, even annotating and taking notes, and then reflecting, of course. So there are a lot of levels of active reading that are a lot more involved on the theoretical side than the activities that I'm going to show you. As a teacher, I think we should all at least be aware of this. So when I send the presentation out, I'm going to encourage all of you to review these in a bit more detail, but you will see this reflected on the next slides with the activities that we're going to discuss. Some of those, just to give you a quick overview: headline writing, which I really like a lot. Headline writing, just giving students a paragraph and getting them to try to write the headline for the let's say an article for a newspaper or a magazine. Jigsaw reading, which is actually there's several ways to do jigsaw reading. Some of you might already have incorporated that. It's been featured in our lesson plans before as well, but I'll be giving you good references this week on how to do jigsaw reading in your classes, not just for life skills lessons, but obviously in your normal language lessons as well. Collaborative visualization, that's quite a mouthful, that phrase, but it's quite easy. When students are reading, getting them to work together to produce some visual representation of what they're reading. For example, if it's a story, if it's a reader, getting them to work together on a project where they can each try to demonstrate what they visualize that story or that reading looks like, and beyond just the text on the page. We've already talked about anticipation and prediction, along with fact and opinion. Other activities like think, pair, share, and trying to get students to understand the purpose, tone, bias, inference in the text. These are all activities we can do and elements of active reading here at the bottom. In all of this, from the youngest age, we are trying to get our students to identify an argument, to try to get them to understand these three main concepts when they're reading a text: the stance, the thesis or a topic sentence in an argumentative text, the evidence that is supporting that stance, and the explanation, the evidence or the link of the evidence to the stance. Now, another thing I'm going to share with you all, and this is highlighted especially for middle school teachers, I've got a nice database of these paragraphs for you that are color-coded. And you can go through and you can use these with students to try to get them to read and understand how the different parts of a well-constructed paragraph can support an argument, and how to find the argument in the text, which is certainly a very important skill for our students to be able to do. This is one example for you. You'll have many more in the blog. However, and any of you who were at the symposium back in, I guess it was May or June, might remember this. Once we get students to understand the concept of argument, we also want them to understand the concept of bias as we get more toward, as you know, my favorite area and what I'm trying to incorporate into every session, media literacy, which I think is just so important. This activity here, whose side are they on, is a great reading activity. I really like it because students have to read, they have to understand, and then they have to explain not just an argument, they have to explain markers of bias in this particular reading. So Vahape, since you helped me back in the symposium months ago, I'd ask your help again. If you could briefly scan this, or maybe you remember it from the last time, if you could explain to me the answer to this question: whose side are they on?
Yeah, I remember the text, by the way. Yeah, they are on the side of Southampton.
Great. And
obviously.
So,
yeah.
Obviously, then how is that obvious to you?
From the adjectives that the writer used to describe Southampton's performance in the match, and the adjectives the author used to describe Manchester City. For example, even from the first sentence, Southampton Football Club put up a brave fight against Manchester City. So this was a clear clue for me to see the bias from the author.
So very nice. So when we get to bias, then we have to be building on foundational skills we've done in previous lessons, obviously. So let me ask you a question, Zainab. Southampton Football Club put up a brave fight against Manchester City last night. Is that a fact or an opinion?
We can't measure how brave were they, so it's an opinion.
Okay, very nice. And you gave a reason for why it's an opinion, which is also very nice. So we're then getting students to build upon what we learned about in our fact and opinion lesson to be able to understand what the concept of a bias marker might be. Of course, we don't need to use that word with our students, especially the young learners. Now, there are many other points here where you can find instances of bias, but in general, I want you all to notice that logo at the bottom, Newswise. Great site for you. And actually, it's so great that I am going to stop this and I'm going to show you a sample. We're going to go back to not Neo Kids. We are going to go here, and this is an example of a lesson plan that you can get from Newswise. There are tons on the site. And a lot of these might just need basic adaptation to use with different grade levels. But this particular activity here has a nice lesson plan, a lot of questions here. It's great for introducing the concept of bias in certain grade levels. If you find it a bit heavy, you can skip right to the resources. I really like this activity here. It's a bit big here. Let me zoom out. Okay, Vahape, you're on the spot again. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to skim this. And I'm going to ask you the same thing. Do you see bias here and where?
Sorry. Yeah, again, I mean, not at the beginning, but towards the end of the text, we obviously see bias again. For example, the harsh counsel work still gave her the fine. I mean, again, the adjective and the way that the writer described the decision. Again, there's a clear bias.
Very nice. So you've isolated it to certain types of language, descriptive language, adjectives, adverbs. For example,
Yeah,
she kindly
exactly.
offered,
Kindly, yeah.
approached by a rude counsel worker. That doesn't sound...
Exactly. At first, I mean, it sounds like I mean, the author is describing an event from an objective perspective, but towards the end, again, for example, I didn't pay enough attention to kindly offered, but I mean, towards the end, when it comes to describing the decision, it was clear.
Okay, true. And it might even sound a little bit more like the daily style language that students might see on social media or hear other people talking about. And so giving them a clear idea, especially in the age of social media, of what the difference between a news story, which in this other tab right here, you see the original story from, is it BBC? Yes. You can see the original story, which is quite different. I'm not going to do this right now, but it's quite unbiased. You actually see, kind of, you can make a better judgment of who was right and who was wrong in the story. There's not much descriptive language there, especially not in terms of judging one side or the other. And so this is a great activity because you get both of these to put side by side for students, and you get a chance really clearly to express to them that difference between subjectivity and objectivity, and to show them what bias is. Now, that's a quick example. That's 2 examples for you, but please go to Newswise, find other lessons you can do with your students because it's certainly a great source for getting started with media literacy. Other ways to discuss media bias with your students, help them understand their own implicit biases. Now, we started that last week. Actually, we had some really nice activities, including that stereotype activity we did last week. Explain how the media makes use of our implicit biases. Then try a fake news headlines game. Those are so much fun, and I should show you one now, but because we're so late, I'm not going to. But those, basically, you give students headlines from the news, and they have to guess whether it's a real headline or a fake one. And I've got several links for you that do that, and they're quite fun. They're quite ridiculous, most of them, actually. But for the young learners, it's quite fun and a nice way to explain to them that concept of fake news, which is quite a strange concept. Provide guidelines for evaluating the authenticity of news stories, kind of stemming from the activity we just did, getting them to understand what they should be finding when they read an objective news story versus a subjective one. Discuss the explicit biases of media stories, both local and international. That's getting a bit sophisticated there, but that's another suggestion for you. Now, otherwise, we also want to give our students an idea that, yeah, there are alternative perspectives. We can have facts. We can have alternative facts. People can see the world differently, which we might call alternative interpretations, but there's a limit to what is right and wrong in the end. And students should get the boundary between what is true and false. So I'm going to ask you, Zainab, today, based on how you feel after a long day, and poor Zainab is still sitting in the office there. So tell me, is the cup half full right now, or is the cup half empty, Zainab?
The cup is half full, Mr. Benton.
Okay, that's admirable on getting late in the week at 7 p.m. and still being in the office. So you're an optimist, I see. The cup is half full. Obviously, I can say the cup is half empty, and I can be just as valid when I say that. And, it's just a matter of perspective, of course. And the next one, I'm sure we might have some passionate disagreement about this among students, especially Messi is the greatest footballer of all time. Ronaldo is the greatest footballer of all time. Vahape, is one of these wrong?
For me, yes. I'm a Ronaldo man. That's
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, yes, that was a nice response, actually. So again, getting students to be familiar with the fact that just because I think it, obviously this would demonstrate an opinion from our previous activity, but then you get up to the top and there's actually a lot of people internationally in the last few years. There's a big movement, the Flat Earth Society. The Earth is a spherical planetary body, or the Earth's surface is flat. Now, in the age of social media, and this is a huge justification for why we need to be doing media literacy education, there are many people that feel that if I want to believe this, then that means it's okay, that that's an alternative interpretation. But we skipped some levels here just for timing, but we're now at the point where that's not okay. And our students should know, obviously we should all know, the Earth's surface is not flat. Please tell me there's no disagreement there, Zainab, Ece, Vahape. The Earth's surface is not flat, obviously, is just plain wrong. So this is a nice activity to do. You can obviously add your own examples, not just using mine, to demonstrate these different points. Here's another fact and opinion sheet that I'm going to share. I've got a bunch of other worksheets for these for you this week. And then as part of that 81 different activity book that I'm going to share, this is a nice way to scaffold students actively reading, getting them then to just get into those first stages of beyond the lower order to the higher order, and helping them evaluate and organize the information that they're reading. Mind maps and organizational tools like this are really useful for that. That's just something I wanted to mention. And then one thing that I love to do, and especially you can add this to remedial worksheets, you can supplement or revise the materials we send to you. This is quite a traditional reading activity here with comprehension questions, lightly analytical in nature. You see the passage, you see the long answer question here, and then you add the box. How do you know this? And number 2, what in the text supports your description? And number 3, why do you feel this way? So a lot of times you can do these just as a bonus for your students to take that extra step beyond just comprehending the language and beyond just giving us that basic level of analysis or interpretation, and actually taking another step toward higher order thinking skills. A great way to do active reading. Other higher order thinking skills conducive strategies for you to use in your classroom are here. Not going to go over each one of these because it's quite a long list, and I want you to have an opportunity to reflect on this when you get the presentation, and when you go through and when you try some of these activities that we've been discussing in your classrooms, hopefully this week, maybe even tomorrow. And I did want to say something. You see many images and illustrations. Most of them I have cited. So we start talking about information literacy as a category. We want to make our students familiar, even at the youngest ages, when they're creating media in their classes, they should be responsible for citing and giving credit to where that information has come from. So for me tonight, if you don't see any citation for any of the photos I've used, that means it comes from pixabay.com, which is a great place you can go to get images that are royalty-free that you can use in your own classroom materials or in any of your professional materials as well. And I kept thinking I was going to be late, and look at me, I'm early. But I'm sure there's not going to be a lot of complaints about that, as I know there are many hungry teachers out there ready to go spend some time with your family. But before you do that, I would just ask, is there anything that you have that you want to ask that we can expand on? Any reaction that you have? Anything you would like to request after what you've seen tonight? If so, please use the chat box. And I'm finally seeing the chat box here. So I see some of you participating in those early activities there, which is great. You need to sleep enough in order to see the iceberg before you hit it. Nice.
Well, Mr. Benton, for me, my suggestion would be to have this session face to face, hopefully in the future. That would be great for us.
Well, you know what? We have a group of 200, almost 300 expert trainers now. So that means all of you can take my presentation and you can do it face to face. I'm very happy for you to cascade this, as you are now the official experts. I am anointing you. You will have your certificate in 2 weeks anyway. So please feel free to take this, share it with your teaching teams. Obviously, they can go back and watch the session. Vahap, you are right in fact that this session is as a workshop form. It's even more fun. But at the same time, all of these activities are things that each of you can try in your lessons. Serpil Hoja, that was quite a fitting comment for the life skills work group leader. So thank you for that. And Serpil Hoja and her team, as always, are maintaining the life skills blogs, and they will have all of the information up and ready for you to access by the end of the day tomorrow, I would say. Tumaybe, I'm impressed you made it through with us the whole session here. And for all of you who attended tonight, I really thank you for your time. Let's get to our families and then have a great Friday tomorrow. I know a busy day, and I will see you next Thursday. And thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Benton.
Sure, take care. I'm hanging on just a minute, Bob, Zainab, then we can stop our YouTube channel as well. Good night to all of you on YouTube who joined us.